Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is a very real prospect of a new world order.
The New World Order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
How can I convince you when your ears refuse to hear? You turn your heart away from me each time that I've gone near. Your eyes refuse to meet with mine, they glance away in fear.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that.
Well, it's just a show. How can I contain this anguish and this pain? No way, that's your eyes, blinded by the light.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas. Catch the Free American weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Every time I think about the damage that's been done, the anger wells inside me till I'm almost overcome. I want to tear the moon out of the sky and not the sun.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-998-8631.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American. I'm your host. I'm Clay Douglas. And my guest today is Christopher-Earl Strunk. The Association of a Sovereign Home Rule Within.org is his website. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning. Haven't talked to you in a while.
Yes, sir. Been too long. I'm glad to have you on again. I'm going to kind of start the show out. I've got a lot of questions. I've just been reading your site here. And a long time ago, quite a few years, some friend of mine said, Clay, they don't have the power they want you to think they have. If they did, we would still be under the Syrian Empire, or we'd still be under the Roman Empire, or we'd still be under the British Empire. And the more I thought about that, I kind of came up with a number of questions. Maybe we're still under the British Empire, the empire on which the sun never sets. What if we didn't exactly win that Revolutionary War? And now I go to your site. I go to your site, and you tell me at the end of this 800th year anniversary the concession of the 15th of May of 1213 between the England and the Vatican Holy See. There's proof enough, according to the interrogatories about the Constitution and American law by R.E. Sutherland, that the Pope and the Holy See control the city of London as its puppet. Now, on my show, I have no sacred cows, and I talk about and have written about the Rothschilds, and I've got their history in my book, Mystery Babylon, The New World Order Unveiled. And I was talking to somebody about that. They said, well, you say the Rothschilds are Jewish. Well, yes, I've said that, and they are. And they said, well, but I thought they were German. And I said, well, yeah, they certainly came from Germany, yes. Well, does that mean the Nazis are controlling everything? So maybe you can clear this up for me a little bit. You know, it's not that I want to take over and run the world or rule anybody, but I want to know who does. And it was England, it was the Balfour Declaration that gave the country of Palestine to the Jews. They had to have we fought a world war with basically three communist countries ganging up on Germany. So maybe you can straighten some of this out for me.
Well, if we go back to the time of the occupation of the Holy Land by the Roman Empire.
We need to get your volume up just a little bit more there, Chris. We had it good there for a little while, and let me see if I can bring it up here a little bit too.
Right. The Holy Land is the history of the Holy Land. But I view things from a geographic standpoint, that the land bridge between Africa and the rest of the world is through the Sinai and the Holy Land. And whoever controls those crossroads controls commerce, and that's the land bridge. So that I try to bring it down to a common denominator, which makes sense. Certainly religion is a way to keep people pinned down like a bug on a card so they can be categorized, but certainly commercial power was, after the fall of Babylon and Egypt, controlled by Rome, and that their legions were spread out and far-flung, and it ended up where their 40 acres and a mule given to a member of the legions ended up being taxed, and the retired legionnaires were very unhappy with the taxation where their property was being taken, and as a result Rome actually started hiring the mercenary, the Huns, the very people that the Roman legions had been fighting, and as mercenaries they decided, well, let's just take over the place, and they took over Rome, and of course they wanted the control of the tax farming, which Rome had for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it ended up in 962, which is a real big step between Nero and after Charlemagne, the destruction of the Saxons, and the takeover of the First Reich, which was the First Holy Roman Empire, 962, which went through to 1814. And that the Germans, in fact, were the triumphant leaders of Rome, the Holy Roman Empire. And wherever their legions went, the tax monies flowed back into the central mechanism. But that as the population expanded and transportation, communication connected. There needed to be more efficient ways to control populations and to militarily extract the tax, which continued on through right now. They're using Obama to reestablish the Fourth Reich. You know, the First Reich, 962 to 1814, the establishment of the Protestant Reich, and the Second Reich, which ran from 1814 to 1917, and then the Third Reich, which the von Papen, the Catholic Knights, took over, destroyed the Protestant the stranglehold of the Bismarck Reich, and established what we know now as the Third Reich, and Adolf Hitler, the Austrian. And that lasted until 1945, and from 1945 to the present, you know, the Otto von Habsburg, the Habsburg dynasty, which was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, who had lost their empire by 1916 in their withering battle against the Russians, which was joined by the Prussians in Ukraine, etc. And that, so the Habsburg, the Catholic Habsburg dynasty was always interested in reestablishing the European Union, and that was, of course, finalized by Mr. Obama, who was their agent and put in place by a very high-level Catholic knight, Zbigniew Brzezinski of Poland, and that they are in effect the very high-level German, the German military intelligence that was set up in the middle of the 1940s to replace the Abwehr, which was functional and operational going into World War I, but that the German knights, von Papen in particular, and Canaris, Admiral Canaris and Dönitz, and those of the German Navy, they were at the heart of the maintenance of their control internationally. And of course, Bismarck had spread the Reich, the Second Reich, into South America, into Asia, and the history of the open door policy, 55 days in Peking, with Charlton Heston and David Niven, and you see how the monarchies were looting China and taking over China, and to this day, the same monarchical influence is controlling China, which had a very close relationship to the Mandarin class, and to this day is running China. That's who was the middle class Mao Zedong. You have the whole point of control is that you must have a military which is functional and will implement the policies that you centrally implemented. So that Smedley Butler in the 1920s wrote a book. He was the commandant of the Marine Corps, and when he retired as the head of the commandant, he essentially wrote a book, War is a Racket. He was very tired of being sent out as a Marine to collect the debt from various debtors. And that's what we use the military for, unfortunately. And we serve the Vatican, which is the spiritual head of the temporal structure, which is controlled out of the City of London, which is not the Queen. Matter of fact, the Queen or the King have to ask permission to actually enter London. But that the United States, Washington, D.C., is at the center of the military power of that triumvirate between Rome, London, and Washington. We are the bullet boys.
The three cities, Washington, the Vatican, and the City of London, that's the three cities that run the world. And
absolutely.
And I believe Bar Association, which was, they tried to limit the power of the lawyers with the 13th Amendment. Well, that just disappeared. Whoops. War 1812 and the 13th Amendment just disappeared. That barred lawyers from holding office.
Right. Well, in the Constitution, it says you can't hold a title unless Congress approves it. My opinion is that the 13th Amendment that was passed in 1810, 1811, was never properly ratified, and that although the states carried it on the hooks, those that did ratify it, wasn't properly ratified. In fact, they were pushing to bring in new states just so they could get enough votes. And the real question was, is there the proper number of existing states that ratified the 13th Amendment? I say no. And that, notwithstanding the fact that it had been carried by various states as an amendment, my opinion is that it wasn't ratified. Now, the real issue here, Clay, is that whether or not we were continuing under 81 years of a national emergency. And that's my contention. We have no operational constitution. We have no operational government. We're existing under a Roman conqueror. And that happened in 1933 as a result of the Knights of the Catholic Knights, Kennedy and Roosevelt and others, who used the reparation that was given to the Vatican state by Mussolini in February of 1929 to buy the stock market out when there was a huge run on the market with margin calls, where for 10 years, all the farmers who were successful under Harding and Coolidge and Lewis were told to invest on margin in the stock market. And that the Federal Reserve, which had no banks, what it did is control the currency. All the banks were state clearinghouse banks. And that what happened was that the Knights, the Catholic Knights, and I'm specifically J.P. Kennedy, who had a seat on the exchange, used that $100 million in gold in October of 29 to buy out the stock penny on the dollar, because the Federal Reserve had taken a third of the liquidity out of the state banks, so that when the margin call came, and you have to meet your margin within 72 hours, you go to the bank, withdraw money, and make the payment. Well, if the money's not in the bank, you can't make the payment. So there was a huge number of new money, both Protestant and Jew, which were put into rags. And they were put into rags by the old money, the blue blood class, the Catholic Knights, who were very taken back by the growth of the nouveau riche since the Civil War, and the growth of the industry, etc., which had to challenge their control over this country. And they had made all efforts to set up the Pilgrim Society, George Peabody, etc., who had borrowed money from the Bank of England, which was set up by the Jesuits, by the way, under William and Mary. And J.P. Morgan's father, who was Peabody's partner, but that the blue blood power structure connected to the city of London and connected to Rome, going back to the time when Prince John became King John, and he refused to appoint the then Pope's choice for cardinal for England. That he essentially was put in a position when the barons were turned against him to make a concession to the Pope, the then Pope, saying forever, in perpetuity, he gives up all control of all the holdings of the British, of England, to the Pope, and that the Pope would then appoint and control the management of all the holdings of England. So that since 1213, the entire British Empire has been under the management that was appointed through the various merciful masters and 112 chartered organizations which run the shipping and all manners of commerce and trade. That all runs out of the city of London. and that those organizations were chartered by the Pope starting in the 1300s, so that the king or the queen pays homage to the ultimate monarch of the world, which is the Pope. And that I challenge anybody who would say that there's any country out there which is sovereign and operates for the good of its own people. There is no country at this point, especially under Obama, who serves the Pope, who serves German military intelligence that was set up in 1943 when they realized they were going to lose the war. Martin Bormann and the Knights, the Catholic Knights in Madrid, set up the basis to activate the expansion and the movement of all power into South America and other parts of the world. And of course, they were given time to do that during the Bridge Too Far market garden.
There's been quite a bit of research that says Hitler lived. Bormann spirited him out to Argentina, and he lived there at the foothills of the Andes. Wasn't killed at the bunker. I think that comes.
He lived on a compound very close to Patagonia, and that, according to Jerry Corsi, who had done his research and used the files both in British and Russian files, that even Eisenhower at the time said he did not believe that Hitler was dead, and that in fact they had done a DNA test on the skull. It was a woman's skull in the bunker. So that all of this was just almost a year ago. Jerry Corsi came out with a book documenting how Denitz's and Canaris's network had moved Eva Braun and Hitler along the lot of gold by submarine into Argentina. And of course, all of that was pretty set up by the Second Reich under Bismarck, where their influence into Paraguay, into Brazil, had been well established 50, 60 years earlier. So that, yes, Hitler, I have a picture of him as an old man, and it's quite remarkable. It's the picture of him with a jowl and without mustache or hair, and that's just what he looks like.
I'd love for you to send me one of those. You know, I've got a quote up here. I put up Mein Kampf, up the English version of Mein Kampf up on my website, along with a film called The Greatest Story Never Told about Adolf Hitler. And I have a quote here by John F. Kennedy, of course, who was murdered by someone, the bankers, I think. Hitler will emerge from the hatred that surrounds him now as one of the most significant figures who ever lived. He had a mystery about him in the way he lived and in the manner of his death that will live and grow after him. He had in him the stuff of which legends are made. Now, he is probably the most demonized person in history, and when I put up this information, not because I'm a Nazi, not because I support, National Socialism, I simply want to know. I want to know both sides of the story, and as far as I can tell, 3 communist-controlled countries, and one of which, our ally, Uncle Joe, he was pretty much guilty of murdering 60 million white Christian Russians, and of course China, the same thing. As soon as the communists took over there, they killed maybe more than 60 million. Some accounts go up to 100 million in China. And these are our trading partners now. I think it looks to me, in studying history, that we're being set up for the same kind of control under Obama. I filmed the first Homeland Security meeting after 9/11, which I believe was a Jewish plot. They used the Mossad, and they used nuclear weapons to blow up 9/11 to take us into these wars in Iraq which obviously still isn't over yet. It looks to me that they have set us up in the Homeland Security meeting. They said, in case of a single outbreak of smallpox in a major metropolitan area, or an earthquake, or natural disaster of significant size, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. I guess some of us won't line up on the Kmart parking lot to get a vaccination for a disease that's been eradicated in the United States for 100 years. And I think they may have already killed, with all their various cancers and their chemtrails and their genetically modified foods, they may have killed more Americans, especially if you include abortion in this, than they killed in Russia. Any validity to that belief?
Well, I like to put names on they, and certainly I don't. The Jews are useful whipping boys for the Knights of Malta, which are subservient to the Superior General of the Jesuit Order.
They hide behind the term Jew, and right. They use the Jews, and they will sacrifice them in a heartbeat if it benefits them. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. But that the entire government of the United States is run by Knights of Malta, and that a tenant, John O'Brennan of the CIA, all CIA, the Knights run the FBI, the Knights run Homeland Security, the Dame of Malta with Napolitano. The Catholic Knights run Obama. That's who Obama serves. Biden is a knight. But everything was pulled together by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who controlled Carter onward, including H.W. Bush, who was a member of the Trilateral Commission, set up by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was a high-level Catholic knight, an aristocrat from whose great-grandfather had set up the Polish military, and that he served the Pope. They served the Pope. The Pope is the ultimate monarch of the world, and that agreement, that concession between King John and the Pope in 1213, in which we celebrated the 800-year anniversary last year, on the control of all of the assets of that global business run by the Vatican, is ongoing, and that they are not going to allow any national entity to be sovereign or separate to represent the interests of the people within. They will not tolerate that. Any nation, including Libya, including Iraq, including Syria, including Jordan, including Morocco or Algeria or any country, anywhere, including Thailand, they will not permit any monarch or any leader, elected or unelected, to represent the interest of their own sovereignty. They will not permit that. They will have them deposed. They will murder them, and that they use the military order of the Pope, the Pope's Praetorian Guard, the highly secretive organization of the Society of Jesus, to murder and to manipulate. And that's what they do. They operate in covert means, and they have effectively done that for 500 years. They were set up to seize control of the Holy Lands from the Saracens and to smash and annihilate the Protestant Reformation, which is nearly done in. Even all of like Billy Graham and all these traitors who kissed the Pope's ring, they have sold out the sovereign interest of the United States. So I don't. Look, the Jewish thing is there's 5 or 6 different types of Zionism. Personally, I believe the Jewish people are entitled to their own country, a sovereign country. I think their government is traitorous They're not interested in the Jewish people having peace and harmony. And that Shimon Peres and Netanyahu, the furniture salesman working for the CFR, they all serve Rome. That,
I have said, Chris, let me ask you this. I have said, I did a film back a few years back called "There's No Such Thing as the New World Order." I said I believe that the money changers that Jesus ran out of the temple are still with us today. They just changed the name of the temple. They call it the Federal Reserve, International Monetary Fund, or the Bank of England. And of course, go ahead.
More importantly, the Bank for International Settlements that was set up by the Nazis is all powerful, and that the Federal Reserve, it is the various member banks do not have. They have an interest in if the stock were ever distributed, they have an interest in a share, but the stock is not distributed. It is as if a non-profit, and it is under the direct control of Jacob Joseph Lew. And Lew is as Secretary of the Treasury and Geithner before him as a member of a Pilgrim Society. They can tomorrow morning send out the Secret Service and arrest every single member of the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee without having to go to Congress. The Secretary of the Treasury is the most powerful man in the United States. And that is under Title 12 that was put in place by FDR in 1933 on March 9th with the Emergency Banking Relief Act that basically he stated on March 6th. You states cannot open up your banks again unless you're registered with Secretary of Treasury. And the governors were so apoplectic they demanded all of their congressional representation that they immediately, sight unseen, passed the Emergency Banking Relief Act 3 days later, so that they could get their economies running again. All the banks were state banks. They were clearinghouse banks. And by registering with the Federal Reserve and the Secretary of the Treasury, and all the Federal Reserve's regulations are written by the Secretary of the Treasury, that is in law. And that those regulations, they violate them, Secretary of Treasury could arrest these people tomorrow morning. Period. So that this is about the Federal Reserve. Would you really want to hand over to some congressman the control of our currency? Shit, I prefer to get a bullet in the head. These fucking corrupt motherfuckers, I give them control of clean toilets. So why would you ever want to give them control of printing paper? I wouldn't do it. We have a system which is totally corrupt, out of control. It may be reoriented towards local control on the state level. Nobody could tell me, living 20 miles away, how I'm going to live here. Because I want them out of my business here. I want a bottom-up system the way it was originally. But that's not going to happen anytime soon, Clay. We're screwed, glued, and tattooed. So it's more a matter of how do we handle.
Yeah, let's dwell on that for a moment, because I just had a gentleman on my show that's developed a magnetic generator that would power up your home or your city without any power lines, without anything. And I said, well, that's pretty exciting information. When are we going to be able to get one of those and put it on our house? He said, I can't do it here. He said, if I do, they would kill me. So I'm doing this in Indonesia. I'm doing this in Indonesia. And, of course, you know, J.P. Morgan, I guess he had the copper mine, so he made all that money off all that wire that we strung across the country, the umbilical cords. And I have said, you know, Obama's idea of greening America, the government's idea of greening America, is to sell the top of that mountain to a Chinese firm so they can come in and put those windmills on it, run the power down to the power company, and the power company will be happy to sell you that green energy at increased cost. Why don't we just put the solar, the wind, or the magnetics on everybody's home and cut out all of the middlemen?
Well, it's simple. It's simple engineering and science. You know, the sun doesn't shine or the wind blow all the time. You must have as many standby fossil fuel nuclear power plants running as you have now, if not more, in order to, like a flywheel, maintain steady power. You cannot allow power spikes that'll burn out all your equipment. So that they've got to run fossil fuel or other forms of traditional energy generation in order to have all this solar and all this wind is a boondoggle. Now, I know that we have the over-unity engine came out of, like one in Brazil. But again, the monopoly controlled by Wall Street. And which goes with the WAPA, the North American Water Power Alliance. You know, that has been put in place. It's worth, get this, 14 quadrillion as a submission to the Secretary of State of Maryland as an issue of the note. 14.25 billion that knows all the land in which the water from Canada down to Mexico is contained on. It's now been popped to the tune of 14 quadrillion. So you look at water, you look at electric. What's interesting is that under Hoover never went along with interconnecting Texas generating a power for the rest of the country. Texas is self-contained. They will not. It's illegal to export electricity out of Texas, and I congratulate him on that. Herbert Hoover, who spent from the Rolls administration on right through had developed the electrical grid in this country for J.P. Morgan, guaranteed from New York, and that the Catholic Knights control that. And of course, the Catholic Knights are controlled by the Superior General of the Jesuit Order. And to think that somehow that our problems are Jewish is funk. That's Jim Condit's Catholic nightmare. You know, he keeps on, and Jim Condit's such an asshole, you know, for the Catholic green kisser. So, look, electric, water, all commodities are controlled through a very intricate structure of corporate cross-pollination of boards of directors. I've forgotten how many corporations run the world. My associate, Karen Udis, came up with a study that had been done in Switzerland of all of the corporations that are, you know, the overlapping boards of directors that run everything. So that electric and water, they can get you where you are most vulnerable, and then you need water. And at this point, you can't live without electric. Fine, have solar power, or it's one thing to have a solar panel on your roof, but it's another thing to run the means of production. And we're talking about the extraction industry, we're talking about manufacturing, heavy industries that actually make stuff. So you buy your car, I mean, you're not going to make your car at home on solar power. I mean, the car, actually, the real vulnerable to making a car is water. I think it's 5,000 to 10,000 gallons are necessary for every car that is manufactured. I forgot the exact number, but it's at least 5,000 gallons of water. So the vulnerable piece is really water, so that the WAPA about I actually met one of the engineers on the Cimarron Riverfront with the Army Corps of Engineers. I was in the military with his son in Oklahoma.
Now,
And
Stan Myers out of Florida built himself a little dune buggy that ran on water, ran on the hydrogen extracted from the water. He had a pretty simple system, and they killed
until
him.
they killed him.
Yep.
Right, until they killed him, right. Well, so look, what you're talking about is the world without 5 billion people. You're talking about mass extinction of population. That's what you're talking about. Because there is absolutely no way that solar or wind can efficiently generate the necessary power to feed, clothe, and house people as it can with the means that we have right now. 1 gallon of gasoline has enough energy to lift the Empire State Building off the ground where it's off simultaneously. My contention is petroleum is abiotic, and that it comes from the same process where water came from, which was at the center of the earth, or the crust. It's a relationship of temperature and pressure, which comes from the center of the earth working towards the surface. All that is the hydrogen molecules and breakdown of very complex salts and molecules from rock. So that if somebody wants to go out and make a boom buggy with a brown gas, and that's what you're talking about, by moving around the angle of the hydrogen on an oxygen molecule for water, which would split that off and allow it to be the energy to be recombined in recombining it to water again. Fine, go for it. But you're not going to keep 6 to 7 billion people alive on the earth with that method. The way you've got to put the infrastructure in place in order for that to happen. And that one-on-one, fine. You're out living, in a tar paper shack, and we're going to end up there anyway. The way that the Catholic Church is pushing us, they're importing all these. We've got the seventh crusade, the Children's Crusade going on that was organized last year. They went out on a request for proposals for local communities to house the people that they were going to be bringing across the border. And that this was all organized by Homeland Security and Obama's ring-kissing motherfuckers and all of the people working in his administration to destroy the sovereignty of the United States. They want this NAWAPA, they want this North American border power alliance in place, and they're going to control every drop of water that goes into your house, and that they will have complete control over you. They control over you right now with electric, and they have control over you eventually, total control, when they can turn off or on the tap for making you do what they want to do if you want water. So it all goes to the fundamentals. Yeah, I have a solar power. I have it. But it's not going to solve the problems in my community. And I'm off the grid, Clay. And because I have to be off the grid. With what I'm doing in my court cases and everything else, I cannot afford the money that they're asking here in New York. They're asking 30 cents per kilowatt. 30 cents a kilowatt. My mother's location down in Virginia, where they have a nuclear power plant, it was a nickel per kilowatt. And it's stable, so that they want to control the population through electric and water. So what you're saying, I agree with you. Yeah, it's great to get off the grid. But let's go for the knights who are running the government. The knights, and you understand the names of, they're the culprits, they're the traitors. Betsy, all these motherfuckers that are screwing the people of the United States, they're traitors. They're absolute traitors.
Well, isn't that almost every politician in there, since we haven't had an independent candidate in the office of the presidency since George Washington. They've all been,
Well,
and I call it 2 weeks. Huh?
I disagree.
Okay.
Since FDR, I mean, Herbert Hoover was independent compared to Herbert Hoover was told by the Guaranteed Bank and Trust Company in 1932, you better declare a national banking emergency. And Hoover told him to go get screwed. He says, you caused this problem, you straighten out the problem. Of course, as soon as FDR came in 33, he took the exact program that was written by the Guaranteed Trust Company and J.P. Morgan and the Catholic Knights. He took that and implemented it with the banking emergency when he did a banking holiday on the 6th of March. Now, FDR was a conqueror. He declared national consecration and gave all of the property and the states and the territories in collateral for payment of the debt. He gave over this country, all of it, the states and everything, to collateral to pay the City of London and the Vatican. And the Vatican had become the major shareholder in all of our industry in 1929.
You failed to mention, Chris, that he also took all of our gold for $16 an ounce immediately.
Well, what he did was that he wanted to implement his statist program, the centralized government, with the New Deal. He could not, under a money system, he could not issue debt without it being collateralized by gold. So what he did in between May and June of 1933, he raised $500 million, which was real money back then, guaranteed by gold. He seized all the gold, put it in Fort Knox as collateral for that first tranche of congressional approved debt, which would be guaranteed by gold. And that $500 million became the beginning of the New Deal, and that because they had seized all the gold as collateral for this new state enterprise, this fascist state enterprise, and FDR was a fascist, plain and simple. He brought the fasces in, he reorganized Congress, he put the axe and the twigs on either side of the speaker's podium in the House. He implemented, they changed the big I on the dollar bill. He implemented the New World Order. I agree with you. The New World Order has always been around. It's always been that one world, one seeing eye, which is since the time of the Caesars. And we're going, I believe that Pope Francis is the seventh Caesar, and that we're at end times. But that I believe that he had to implement a debt system based upon taking all of the persons, all the corporations, all the titles for all the property, and putting it under the control of the Secretary of the Treasury. And that's what he did on the Emergency Banking Relief Act, and he used the Trading with the Enemy Act that was set up as legislation to protect the United States against enemies. And the enemy at that point was German in 1917. And anybody dealing with Germany, which had just blown up ships in New York Harbor at the port of Jersey City, it was a huge explosion in 1916. They blew up the ammunition ships. That was the Avoir. The Avoir wrote the Zimmerman telegram between the Foreign Office and the German Foreign Office, saying to the ambassador to Mexico, if in fact the Wilson administration gets into the war, this is 1916, he had just been reelected, if he should get into a war, that the German ambassador should make a deal with Mexico to start a second front with the promise that they will be given the southwest of the United States in exchange for invading the United States. Mexico had already been invaded 3 times by the United States, going back to Fussen Brothers, what's his name?
Santa Anna?
Whitfield Scott. Whitfield Scott, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, going back to the time of Whitfield Scott. And that, but again, we had invaded several times, including Pershing, when all of the Eisenhower, all of these generals ended up, but they were second lieutenants under Pershing in the invasion of Mexico at the turn of the century. So that my contention here is that we're under, and it's not mine, this is Frank Church in 1973. We've lived under a national emergency for 40 years. That is in the Senate report of 73. They passed in 1976 the National Emergency Act, where it said that the president from now on must renew the national emergency every year, annually, or else it ceases to exist. And then in 1977, under the Carter administration, they passed, and under Brzezinski in particular, they passed the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which said if there's a economic emergency internationally, there must be a declaration under executive order done for that too. So that so far, Obama has signed 39 executive orders reestablishing and establishing new national and international emergencies. We exist under martial law. We exist under a military government, which is Rome's military government from the time of FDR on. And I take exception to anybody that would say that somehow, when you get put in as president, that somehow you're independent. That's so far from reality. I don't know. I mean, nobody was ever independent. They were put there as representing the people who put them there and to safeguard the Constitution. Washington was the most trustworthy man in the colonies, and he had threatened the Congress. He had threatened the Continental Congress. He says, if you don't solve the debt situation, if you don't put together a way to maintain what we've lost, so many men and so much booty, or so much capital on, if you don't solve that problem, I'm going to reestablish the Continental Army, and I'll get rid of you guys, and I'll find a Congress capable of protecting the sovereignty of what we fought for. So that Washington was a trustworthy man, but he represented the people. He represented moneyed interest. He represented money interest who had spent a lot of money making a sovereign country. Yeah, Washington, of course, he was the closest of any person in the United States or in the colonies at that time to the throne of England. He was the closest thing to a duke under the Washington family as Normans, going back to the War of the Roses in 1066. And this is according to Washington Irving in his 2-volume set of the life of Washington. So that George Washington was, his family was very close to the throne of England. That, but that doesn't mean that he is not dedicated to protect the sovereignty of the nation. He very much was. And you go all the way through, let's say, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson fought Biddle and the second bank that was controlled by England, and he closed that. Of course, we're still dealing with the fact that we do not have a House of Representatives, which is increasing every 10 years. That stopped happening in 1910. We have gone from 1 to 30,000 persons, one House member to 30,000 persons when we created this country, and it was Washington who ordered that. Washington was he was the president of the Constitutional Convention. He was presented the final draft. He read the thing, and his only comment was, we did not have a revolution to have one representative for 60,000 persons. He says that's what the House of Commons does. If we wanted to do the same as the House of Commons, hell, we would have joined them. He said we're going to have 1 to 30,000 to show that we're better. And that's where the 1 to 30,000 came in that Article 1. Now, we have the 12 proposed amendments to the Constitution that were put forward by Franklin and others in 1789 that were put in place. They had 10 amendments that were passed of the 12 proposed. The first and the second proposed amendment was a formula for increasing the size of the House of Representatives and a pay raise for the members of Congress. Well, that was passed in the 90s. They got their pay raise. It was passed in the dead of night, but nobody has ever passed the first proposed amendment to increase the size of the House of Representatives. It has been done based upon arbitrary means. If right now, if you use one for 30,000, there should be 1,500 House members. Now, the proposal in 1789 said there should be up to 200,000 persons, and there was a formula. Well, that's what we need, Clay. We need a formula so that the people can be represented again. Right now, we've got nearly one representative per 750,000 people. 750,000 people. You realize we only had 3 million people in the colonies at the time of the Revolution? And only 5% of them were involved in the Revolution, or 5% were opposed, and the 90% was just a big road bump in the middle? Look, we need to get representation in the House of Representatives, which is not bought and paid for by the corporations. And the reason that they're bought and paid for is that they spend all of their time fundraising from the corporations to prevent anybody from opposing them. This is House numbers.
Now, Chris, I went through the presidential election in the Republican Party with the first candidate to sign up for the presidency in 1996. His name was Charles Collins. And I traveled with him from Maine to California, through Dallas, through through a number of states, and all the Republican caucuses. Every time Charles got up to speak, and he was trying to tell people, he was a Rhodes Scholar, banker, he was trying to tell people that according to their charter, we could buy back the Federal Reserve and wipe out, $16 trillion debt overnight. And every time
Absolutely.
Charles...
I agree with him.
Every time Charles got up to speak at every convention, every cameraman on stage turned the cameras off and pointed them at the ground, so nobody in the Republican Party ever got to hear Charles Collins speak.
Well, Bismarck used to call the Republicans the black and the red Republicans, and he called Lincoln the red Republican because he was a communist. That's what he said of Lincoln. Now, the Republicans have a abolitionist background, and they were considered the red Republicans, and which came out of England. The abolitionists were a movement that was started in England before the Revolution. They had actually got rid of slavery. Now, going to Mr. Collins, if he had been complete in his presentation, and that a congressman, Italian name, a congressman, the fellow that they put in jail up in.
I just had him on my show just a few days ago. Traficant. Yeah. Now Traficant
was following through on the knowledge that had been laid out by the Senate that were existing under martial rule. We have a military government starting with FDR. They seized all of the property in the United States as collateral for the creditors, and then they proceeded to create a debt system based upon every newborn is registered in commerce, and that corporation is seized and the title is sold and pre-sold on the expectation of 65 years of taxes. That young person, when they get old enough, or that person who's naturalized, who are already paying taxes if they're naturalized, the cash flow all goes to the creditors. Now, Traficant is not explaining that in a way in which we've got to get rid of the Proclamation 2040 that was issued by FDR. 2040 made the president, as commander-in-chief, a total dictator, an Augustus Caesar, who seized everything and all of the property. There are no states. They're merely the possessions of the United States as an intermediary for the operations of its military government to, in dedication to seize and control the minerals and the property throughout the world for the city of London and Rome as the third city. Now, come to grips with that. We're still under martial process. I am actively involved in making people into private citizens. Mr. Collins, if he had said, we've got to get rid of FDR's dictatorial proclamation that said you can't move until you get permission from me, and that's what it says.
All right, hold on just a second. We gotta take a break, station break. We'll be right back. About 60 seconds here. Stay with me.
Discover what's really going on in the world that mainstream media won't tell you. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs. TruthRadio.com. The truth is out there.
You are either a person who needs help, a person who doesn't need help, or a person who doesn't need and doesn't really care about anybody who needs help. Or maybe you're a member of the fourth group, a person who doesn't need help and really enjoys helping other people. Now, if you're in that last group, you have enough to live on and you really do enjoy helping other people. I want to invite you to visit our new website, www.enjoyhelping.com. That website is intended to be a kind of Craigslist gathering place for people who genuinely need help and want to tell you in their own words about their need, and then you come to their rescue and contact them, figure out if they're really genuine or not, and provide them for help. This is a meeting place for people in need and people who enjoy meeting needs. EnjoyHelping.com. That's www.enjoyhelping.com.
All right. We're back. Christopher-Earl Strunk is my guest today. And by the way, in two states, in Maine and Michigan, they actually unplugged Charles Collins' microphone while he was speaking. And if our elections had been semi-fair, I believe Pat Buchanan would have been president, and Alan Keyes would have been vice president. But Charles was barred from the convention. A registered presidential candidate was barred from entering the Republican convention in Florida, and they moved buses of Bob Dole supporters in. And of course, Bob Dole got the thing. Alan Specter really hated me, because every time he got up to speak for one of these for Dole or whoever they had chosen, I'd walk down the aisle and say, "Hey, Specter, tell us about that magic bullet." They didn't care much for me. But how do we do this now? I mean, Bush gave us a couple of wars and probably facilitated 9/11, which I believe was a nuclear attack on America, on two buildings that were basically condemned. They blew them up and collected the insurance on them after they leased the building, conveniently leased the buildings after having an inspection team in there for about 10 years. They came to the conclusion that the buildings couldn't be saved. They couldn't build scaffolding that high, so the only thing to do was to bring it down. So we got this dual-purpose explosion. Go ahead.
My father was a very successful architect here in New York. I worked in his office and I studied architecture, and we used to go meet with the state architects on the 27th floor of one of the towers, and we used to have lunch up on the Sky restaurant, right? And we'd sit there. You almost have to wear seatbelts when you're when you're sitting there, and they had a little rim so that the water glass wouldn't fall off the table. It was moving 15 to 20 feet at the top, right? It was whipping around because of the wind. Now, he said to me, an architect could not build a building like this unless he first designed a way to take it down. So you never would start a building unless you knew how to demolish the building. So that the World Trade Center was actually built to be taken down in a specific way, and the way it came down is the way it was built. So all of the plan to take that building down was filed with the Pataki. The Pataki knew the emergency evacuation and demolition plan was. It's in the New York State Governor's office, top secret document. And there was a need to know at the fire department, and that was sequestered. And that happened in the late 70s, where the Citicorp building had been built up in the 50s, and it was built like you drive a stake into the ground, and you build the building with a stake, and they had a tuning fork at the top of the building. And the tuning fork would waste the energy, so it wouldn't be whipping about like the World Trade Center was, on a windy day. But what they did, these architecture students were at the top of the building looking at the design of the pendulum at the top, and they saw this huge crack developing. They said, "Oh my God, this thing isn't working." So the entire Citicorp building was evacuated. We're talking a tall building. That thing would have definitely toppled. And we're talking about 800 or 900 feet high. Okay, and that would have taken a lot of real estate with it. So that coming off of that dire emergency of architectural design and engineering failure, they implemented an emergency demolition structure plan for every tall building in New York City. So that no building in the city of New York, as it exists today, does not have a demolition plan secretly on file with the governor's office, Secretary of State. Now, you can find that only if you spit blood. I tried to get these for you. They will not release them. So the point is that, the 30-year bond, the moral obligation bonding, reached its limit in 99, 2000. You had the Blackstone group come in with Silverstone. Blackstone bought the Building 7. And Building 7, Blackstone is Peter G. Peterson, who was a very powerful presider of the Council on Foreign Relations. He was a Knight of St. John, and let me tell everybody that the Knights of St. John were put together with the Knights of Malta. The Episcopal Knights were united with the Catholic Knights 1 year after the death of Kennedy in 1964. So that Peter Peterson is he is the Episcopal side of Carlucci. He was the Catholic side, the Carlisle group, and Blackstone. You've got an Episcopal operation, you've got a Catholic operation. That's, again, London and Rome. So that they were melded together, and that they both control the Knights of Malta, which is including the Knights of St. John and the Knights of the Equestrian Order, all under the direction of the Superior General of the Jesuits at Georgetown and Fordham and other Catholic schools, Jesuit schools around the country. They run things. They are the go-to guys. But what I'm getting at here is that they knew how to take those World Trade Center towers down. Building 7 was owned by Peter G. Peterson. He was very tightly connected into the CIA and the intelligence community. They were the ones who toppled Salvador Allende, whether he deserved it or not. His supposed assassination or suicide, he was suicided. Whether he deserved that, I'm not going to get into it. But the point is that the Knights, working through the Treasury and the Pentagon, went around overthrowing people for business reasons. And that's what we've been doing for a very long time with our martial government, with our military government. We've got to put this military government back in the box under a legitimate president who is there as an executive to safeguard the Constitution. I'm taking the opportunity to do that, Clay. We have an illegitimate president who's not even a citizen of the United States occupying the commander-in-chief office, and that he is running roughshod to destroy the sovereignty of the United States. All of the Knights of Columbus, like Boehner, who shuck the Pope's ring, who shuck up to the military government in the United States, are keeping Obama there. Imagine doing a lawsuit against Obama 2 years from the end of his term. What a joke. You know, a lawsuit takes 4 or 5 years to run out. I mean, if anybody was serious right now, would cut off all the money flows, all appropriations to the executive. I would shut down the executive tomorrow morning by withdrawing all money. But you've got so many Catholics, ring kissers, and melanin measurers in Congress that they can't be trusted.
Well, let me talk about that for a minute, because this pretty well relates to exactly what you're saying. And you know, I've told people, hey, Obama is actually the perfect New World Order leader. That's why maybe that's the reason they put him in that UN office it's always been occupied by Russian generals. He's black, he's white, he's Catholic, he's Christian, he's Muslim, and he's a Jew.
He's an Arab. He's an Arab.
So he's
Semitic,
everything.
yes, he's Semitic. He's Semitic. Absolutely.
He's everything to everybody, I guess. But I have pictures of UN tanks on the cover of my Free American magazine this month, and this invasion that's coming up, which I would be almost willing to bet it's Catholic in nature. All of these children that are coming in here, every time I hear somebody say something about it's for the children, I get a cold chill going up and down my spine.
It's the Seventh Crusade, Clay. The Children's Crusade. They all got massacred when they went in. The Pope sent all the children into the Holy Land. The Seventh Crusade. Read about it. Look, Obama put in office by the DVD, by the Deutsche Verdienst. It was set up in 1943 by the Obwar, by the Catholic Knights, by Martin Bormann and the von Papen crowd and Admiral Canaris, who faked his own death. They set up a secret military intelligence agency, which became the CIA, which became the controls the GRU under the Kaiser. The Kaiser was fighting his cousin in 1914. He was fighting in 1905. He was fighting the Romanovs. He wanted to control all of the lands, all the way out into China. From the open door policy on, this went back to the Boxer Rebellion. The German Kaiser overthrew Bismarck, brought the Jesuits into Germany in the tail end of the Second Reich. He launched the Habsburg Austro-Hungarian army against Ukraine and against the Tsar, and they, through their incompetence, were slaughtered. Habsburg collapsed, the Prussians came in, and they launched war against the Tsar. They overthrew the Tsar. Their cousin, the Kaiser's cousin, was overthrown. And the Kaiser financed Pravda, the magazine, or the paper. He financed and gave a job to Hitler in 1909. He gave a job to Trotsky, Hitler, to Lenin, and to, Stalin. All four of that worked for Pravda in Vienna, financed by the Kaiser as a propaganda arm that went in 1912 inside Russia, or inside Tsarist Russia, to collapse and totally annihilate the control of the Tsar, his cousin, over the Orthodox Church, which controlled the land and all the minerals of Russia. So that the Kaiser was greedy. He was an evil, greedy man. And he created the communist movement. Look, Marx was a German. He was a spoiled, middle-class, self-hating Jew who had a Oedipal complex, who hated his attorney father, and he was essentially a spoiled brat who hooked up with Engels, a slumlord, and he was educated by a Jesuit priest by the name of Beckx, a Belgian Jesuit priest, educated Marx while in elementary and middle school, and he was educated in social justice doctrine that was developed by Luigi Caparelli, who was a Jesuit priest, who started Civil Catholic, the doctrinal arm magazine of the Catholic Church. And Luigi Caparelli, his major goal for the 19th century was to solve the problems that had developed during the French Revolution, so that there could be a ultramontane fascism without the sort of violence which had swallowed up the monarchies of Europe during the French Revolution. So Luigi Caparelli developed the social justice doctrine that was then taught by Beckx, B-E-C-K-X, to Marx. Marx was given a job because he essentially was banned from his father to go get a job, go do something productive in your life. He goes and he goes into the British Museum as a spoiled brat who was a self-hating Jew who was a communist. He wasn't known as a communist at that point, but certainly he was a social doctrinaire. He developed the term capitalism, communism. He was carrying out social justice policy. Again, the Jesuits loved the Jews because they can all be blamed. There is no capitalism or communism. It's a jingoistic bullshit term for describing the type of economics which is either centralized statist feudalism or free enterprise, where you're able to interact in carrying out commerce through the science of commerce, or the supply and demand and everything else. So that everything that Marx did was Jesuit driven. And I just wanted to put that on the table here, because I'm tired of hearing, oh, he's a Marxist. Crap! Obama was inculcated, he was trained by Gregory Galuza, a Jesuit priest in the Gamel Foundation in Chicago. A Jesuit trained him. And he was trained in the dead man, the dead white man, the dead Jewish white man, who had met with Cardinal Montini, who was, his biggest effort was to make sure that all the Catholic unions were under the Catholic Church's control, and that they would, as a cartel labor, would get together with cartel capital to create cartel government. That's what the Mussolini government was. It was a cartel government. That's what the Hitler government was. It was a cartel government. That's what Lenin was putting together, a cartel government under the People's Republic, the Soviet Republic. So that Lenin was an agent, as was Stalin, as was Hitler, as was Trotsky, agent of the Tsar, working for the Avoir. And that the GRU was set up by Trotsky. In effect, the military intelligence of the Soviet Union was set up by German intelligence. You realize that Stalin, or all of the military of, after World War I, all the military of Russia was trained by the Germans. They were the ones who trained the Russians. And that the relation, all of the training for the Russian army, or rather for the German army, was done in Russia under the Versailles structure. And that the manufacturing and everything else, there was a triangular trade arrangement between Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin that built the German army. So that the relationship, we're seeing that right now with Merkel and Putin. We're seeing We're seeing the relationship of Germany to Russia right now. And we're seeing, under the present condition of the collapse of the sovereignty of the United States, under the finger of London and Rome, using their military government, we're about to be friggin' invaded. We're going to be invaded. You're talking about the UN tanks and troops. No, we got 100,000 foreign troops that will be called out at a moment's notice. If, in fact, the U.S. military will not draw down and shoot American citizens in the street. So things are a lot worse than you portray, Clay. And I know that you're a dedicated patriot. And I know that we've got to put this thing in perspective. I'm working with Michael Shrimpton, who's an intelligence analyst, a British barrister who has been working with Christopher Story, who exposed the involvement of H.W. Bush in offshore accounts with the CIA, and its drug running, in its gun running, and in its child running. Now, that the CIA traffics in children, it traffics in drugs, and it traffics in guns using Adnan Khashoggi and all of the Mark Rich and all of the frigging whores who are working for the triumvirate London, Rome, and Washington. So to continue on this military nightmare that we've been under for 81 years.
Now,
So that,
you mentioned, excuse me for interrupting, but you mentioned the drugs. I first got threatened by the CIA when I exposed George Bush's Operation Watchtower operation. That was George Bush, Manuel Noriega, bringing cocaine in from Colombia into Albrook Air Force Base, shipping it up via Barry Seal to Bush's employee, a governor by the name of Bill Clinton. And when I put that in my biker magazine back in Miami, I got threatened by the CIA. We're going to let you live this time, Clay, but don't do anything like that again. And, it's kind of one of my things. I think probably the most encouraging news that we've got out in current events is the legalization of marijuana and hemp in Colorado and Washington, because I said they stole our billion-dollar crop. They sent it to communist Russia, communist China, Mexico, Canada, everywhere but the United States. People are growing hemp, the most beneficial plant in the world, and now we've got it legal in 2 states. I've said if you really want to solve the problems, we just need to initiate free trade, real free trade, tear down that wall between us and Mexico, put tables up, decriminalize or abolish all laws against victimless crimes, and let the Mexicans and the Peruvians and the Colombians and bring all their crops up, lay it on a table, pay a duty on it, and let Americans take home what they want. Of course, that won't happen because, it's kind of like Ayn Rand said, isn't it? The government has no control over honest citizens, so they got to make criminals out of us. What's that in your pocket, son? Whoa, you're going to go to jail. You're going to work for IBM for 25 cents an hour for the next 3 or 4 years. Now, of course, go ahead.
The Cato Institute, which is ultimately the libertarian think tank for economics, and certainly Milton Friedman had a better handle on it. But we're well beyond the pale on this. We're going to lose 150 million population if, in fact, we should lose our electric grid in this country. We can lose 150 million people within a year, just through starvation and the attrition as a result of not having electric, and we're not having water. So the cities will collapse. So legalizing drugs is the least of our worries at this point, Clay. I tend to agree with you that I believe that we've got to maintain control of our borders from a military standpoint. We've been invaded. We have as many, according to Paul Williams, for 10 years, he's been talking about the fact that there are nuclear weapons in place, going back again to the relationship of the Zimmerman telegram to Trotsky, who set up La Raza. La Raza was set up by the GRU under Trotsky when he was living in Mexico. And it was part of the GRU DVD. But actually, Trotsky was killed in 1940. But that the AVWAR was running Trotsky. The AVWAR military intelligence had been working with the Soviets, and they set up the Soviets, for God's sakes, under the Kaiser. So the Raza and the MS-13 and the various gangs that have been centered in the cities around the country are our biggest problem right now. I agree with you that making drugs available and letting people shoot themselves up and let them die now is a lot quicker than letting 150 million people die later. Okay, I mean, there are a lot of people a lot of weak-minded people will get hooked on drugs, and they will become a serious problem. It's a serious problem now because of the CIA running all these drugs in with the various gangs, and that Jeb Bush, half the people in Miami are on drugs. That's Jeb Bush, all the friends of Jeb Bush, ex-governor of Florida, Mr. Drugs. So putting everybody on drugs is not going to solve our problem today. I agree with you that it should be legalized in the same way as alcohol. Okay?
I would rather see somebody kill themselves on heroin than put them in a jail cell and at the cost of $50,000 a year to feed and clothing them. I just don't see the sense in that.
We're operating on debt. We have no money. We're operating on debt. All of the human beings are after birth. They are registered, their names are registered in commerce through a quasi-corporate entity, and they assume the name and responsibility to pay the taxes and all the obligations of that name registered in commerce. When somebody is arrested, it's the name that's arrested, and the surety volunteers to go to prison. So that I specialize in ceasing people from being surety and turning them back into private citizens that were the way they were before 1933. And that when somebody goes to prison, there's a bond, there's a performance bond, which is sold on the open markets with a cutoff number. They are worth a lot of money, and the corporations buy the expectation of cash flow. So the only way to stop that system is to get rid of the debt system, which isn't going to happen overnight. But because that's the way they control people, is through debt. It's like, speaking of the ultimate heroin, that's the debt system. The financial and political elite control the people through the debt. So I specialize in getting people back to their private citizenship status, ceasing to be the surety for the debtor in commerce, which was registered by their mother within days of their birth. You can't operate without a name registered in commerce. I'm dealing with a congregation in a state with a minister who's had home births, and people have had home education, and they can't get a driver's license, they can't get a bank account, they can't operate in commerce. Unless you've got a name that's registered, you cannot operate in commerce. You're living in a tar paper shack off the grid. And that's no way to exist. You only have a short period of life. And we have a debt system that's got to learn how to use the debt system. The power elite know how to use it. And I'm teaching people how to use it. But there is a black and white letter law which is in place, which I can use, and I do use, to transform people from from public U.S. citizens into private U.S. citizens. And that's the thing that Traficant won't discuss. That's the thing that certainly Frank Church, the Knight of Malta, won't discuss. He was a big-time Catholic. And certainly you won't get that from anybody in government. So my website gets into it. I offer that as a service. I register the private citizen with beneficial interest with the Secretary of the Treasury. Secretary of the Treasury owns all the property. He is the alien property custodian created under law by the Congress in 1933. He owns everything. He owns the state of, you're in Texas, he owns Texas. Texas is owned by the Treasury. Every title, every car, every piece of property, every person is owned by the Secretary of the Treasury. They all have titles on them. All those titles are owned by the Treasury. And I reverse that. I can reverse it within 90 days. And it's an uphill battle because it's a way of thinking, okay? I agree. We should have no more victimless crime. I agree. We should have, if you want to shoot up heroin, go ahead and go do it, just so you're not going to harm somebody else. But don't fall back on me asking for public assistance. You know, I don't want your friggin' addiction as part of my problem. It's not my problem, okay? So, but the way everything's set up now, everything's top down, it's run by the Catholic Church. Look at the way the Catholic Church has volunteered all these towns all over the country, taking these 7 children's crusades. It's an invasion, for God's sakes. And it's the MS-13 gangs. They are more worried to me than the United Nations. The United Nations is chickens. One shot and they run away, man. The United Nations is a bunch of chicken shits. They're just run. I worry about the MS-13. They're heavily armed. They've got rocket-propelled grenades. They've got heavy armored equipment. They've got it deposited all over the country. And they will be the problem that we run into, not the United Nations. No, they're chickens. What a joke, United Nations. Bullshit. The point, though, is that we have a big gang problem in this country. And unless we come to grips with that, and that's run by the CIA. CIA is the Catholic intelligence agency. That's who started. Look, Reinhard Gehlen, who was an au intelligence officer, turned over all of his au files, which became Interpol files, and they became the core of our understanding the control of the Red Orchestra and the various, it was the Distina network, Otto Skorzeny and that crowd, who ran the Stay Behind network, the various terrorist operations in Europe after the war and elsewhere. All of the Japanese Red Army, all that was run by the secret transformed Abwehr into DVD, and that ran out of Madrid. And now, in effect, the Germans are running the United States through Washington, through the Jesuit orders. And the Jesuits are the think tank. That King Ledachowski was a Polish aristocrat, a Polish knight, who became the superior general in 1916, ran the entire the tail end of World War I, and the transformation of Europe after World War I under the Versailles Treaty. And he died in 1942, but he ran the entire Abwehr, the Jesuit Ledachowski. He set up all the concentration camps. So, and all the concentration camps were set out on the layout of the reductions, the Jesuit reductions of South America. You look at the layout, that's what the plan is. And it was laid out by Ledachowski. So let's get real on this. We have a gang problem. We have a border problem. I would put our troops on our border to shut down the gang operation. Look, if taking drugs was going to solve our problem, I'd say, go ahead and go take drugs. It's not going to solve the problem. You want to relax with alcohol, marijuana. I could give it a rat's ass. My son better not do it, and he's got to deal with me if he's going to do that. But that if somebody can't control themselves and they can't pull their act together, and they need, everybody needs a crutch. Okay, everybody needs their little, their little poke or their little bad habit in order to take the pressure off. Okay, fine, but it's not going to solve the national problem. We're losing. I think we've lost our sovereignty. But in order to reestablish the Constitution, Obama has got to be exposed as a non-citizen. A judge who I'm before right now in Washington has to say he's not eligible. That's all I have to say. It goes to the Senate under the 25th Amendment, and it gets taken care of there. We can't do something as simple as that. Then we don't deserve to be a country. Then it's every man for itself. And I believe it's every man for itself. And Clay, you're doing a great job. I like what you're doing with your housing. I like what you're doing with all of your efforts. I really do.
Well, the ADL and Southern Poverty Law, they've tried to stop my corporations. They've succeeded in stopping my income to a certain extent. They weren't successful at killing me. I'm a little too hard to kill. But, everything that I wrote about 45 years ago is now, as science fiction, is happening now. I wrote about the legalization of marijuana, and it's happened in 2 states now. And they demonized me for starting the militia, but the militia's down on the border right now trying to help the state of Texas do exactly what you're talking about, stop these illegals from coming in. They're not going to be too successful because the illegals, especially the ones from Central America, are being put on trains so they can get through Mexico, which has a little bit stronger immigration laws than we do. But they're being put on trains for safe passage going across, just like Marx and Lenin were put on trains to go safe passage through Germany to Russia to murder the Tsar.
Right, Admiral Canaris in the onboard. Right. Now, I heard about a week ago that there was a deal made in Honduras and Guatemala amongst the government and private industry and the Chinese that they would clear out large portions of those populations that would require a certain amount of water. Now, the Chinese have made a deal to put in a new canal through Central America. And the canal uses huge amounts of fresh water. Now, when you take that amount of fresh water away from human consumption, you're going to cause major dislocations. So that what they're doing is relocating large populations into the United States so they could build their canal. Now, that is the scuttlebutt that I got on the inside. All right? The Knights of Malta, who are very tight with the Chinese Central Committee, which is run by the German Abwehr. And it's been run by the German Abwehr since the Kaiser. They are, and the Jesuits are the think tank. They're the ones who are the go-to guys. You want a question answered on how things work, you go to a Jesuit. He'll tell you. They got the 4th level Jesuit has got to have 35 years of high-level education before you get into the 4th level. I mean, these guys are the go-to guys. They're running things everywhere. And militia on the border. I agree with the Minutemen. I have friends who went down on the border in Arizona in 2005. Here in New York who went. Friends of mine, close friends. Certainly, the drug trade run by the CIA is a major concern. It's been going on since Vietnam and Guggenheim Bank, Air America. But all of that is run by German intelligence. And I'm saying that with a straight face. I'm saying that that when Christopher Story had connected the dots with H.W. Bush and his running of cocaine into Arkansas. And Hillary Clinton was the bag man for all the drug money laundering that went out through the Children's Defense Fund. The Children's Defense Fund was located in Chappaqua, New York. Children's Defense Fund connected to the CIA and the Peace Corps and USAID. That's involved in smuggling children, running children. You meet a child like Obama. Obama's married to a transgender.
Yeah, that's why this month he declared this month to be gay, lesbian, and transgender month.
He is a Satanist. He's a practicer. He's a 33-level Mason, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood International out of Istanbul, Turkey. He is a Satanist, Aleister Crowley Satanist, who is a Luciferian, who is working for, and so was Hitler, by the way. He was a Luciferian. The high-level knights are Luciferians. Under the highest level of Luciferianism are the Jesuits. They practice at the highest level of Satanism. If you look, I compare Obama to Hitler. Listen for a moment. Pergamon, the Temple of Pergamon is the seat of Satan. The Pergamon building in Berlin was built by Hitler as a celebration of the seat of Satan. And lo and behold, in the Democratic Party inauguration at the convention, Obama had them build a model of the Pergamon, the seat of Satan. And that's his mentality. And of course, the Democrats, they're all friggin' Satan, Luciferian motherfuckers, no good fascist, communists, you name it. The damn Democrats are crazy people. Absolutely insane. Absolutely. And the Republicans, they're underfunded Democrats. Yeah, you give Republicans funding, they'd be like the Democrats. That's how bad things are at the top. But the point is, you compare this Temple of Pergamon that Hitler worshipped, Obama worshipped. It's Berlin, Germany, okay? The Pergamon is the seat of Satan. And that's who Obama is. And he's working with the Jesuits as sure as I'm sitting here. He is a Muslim brother. The Muslim brother, just this year alone, has been in and out of the White House 167 times. They're working with Fethullah Gulen, who is since the assassination of Anwar Sadat. The Muslim Brotherhood was outlawed as a terrorist organization in Egypt, and it was transferred into Turkey. Erdogan is a Muslim brother. Fethullah Gulen is the head of the Turkish branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's living in the Poconos. He's got his own agents inside the White House since 2009. This is Fethullah Gulen. So the Muslim Brotherhood operated out of Turkey because it was banned in Egypt. So that now Turkey was an extension of the Anwar. It was aligned under the Kaiser, as the Caliphate was aligned with the Kaiser. The British, through T.E. Lawrence and Churchill, essentially collapsed the Caliphate in 1917 through 21, installed Ataturk, which took out the Suleiman family, and that it took a lot of the steam out of the Kaiser's Anwar, out of his coalition. So that what I'm getting at here is that Obama's first act as president was to take down the Churchill bust and either put it in storage or send it back. I don't know which one. I heard that he sent it back, or he put it in storage. But the point is, Churchill, with T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, in 1921, drew the map of the Mideast so that it was national in character, and the tribes which formed the Caliphate could not get together again that crazy. Obama has reestablished the Caliphate through his Fethullah Muslim Brotherhood, and Erdogan, who supported his first run for U.S. Senator along with Gaddafi. And Gaddafi gave Obama his 2 girls through the CIA. Those girls are adopted. You know, Mitchell, the transgender, the Muslim transgender, and Obama, the homosexual living with a transgender, adopted 2 children out of North Africa, and Gaddafi arranged it with the CIA. Now, this stuff, I couldn't tell you this 6 years ago because I didn't know it. But I've networked with people who do know. The intelligence agencies know this. CIA had its DNA test. The NSA had its DNA. The CIA knew this. They all know. And rather than preventing him from being president, they make horse trading so they can get better budgets. These are the traitors, the knights, the Catholic knights that are like Dempsey, running things. Lenin, out of Fordham University, who converted over as a Wahhabi in Saudi Arabia when he was the CIA station chief in Riyadh. He's a traitor. And we permit these Catholic knights, traitors, from running our government? Anathema. Bring an anathema.
Let me ask you a couple of things here. What is your take on what is happening in the Ukraine and with Russia and Putin? Now, it looks to me. Go ahead.
Well, the Ukraine is a continuation of what the Kaiser was doing through Habsburg. The eastern half of Ukraine was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Habsburg family, the Catholic Habsburg, the Bavarian Habsburg. You couldn't get more Catholic than Habsburg, believe me. He was a Catholic's Catholic. Even Brzezinski couldn't get close to it. And he's a Catholic's Catholic. You know, Polish. The point is that the Ukraine was at the center of the church, Orthodox Church, Kiev. You know, the Tsar, although he was in Novgorod initially, Ivan, and then in Moscow, the center of the church was Kiev. What happened was that Peter, or I forgot, Ivan, whoever went and became Orthodox, went to the Pope, and he says, I want to make all my people Catholic. And the Pope says, okay, we'll call you, I want a head count, I'm going to charge you a fee on every one of your serfs. I'm going to charge you a fee. And Russia was poor, right? This is shit. I'd like to be Catholic, but I can't afford the fee, right? So then he went to the Greek church. The Greek church says, yeah, you buy some of our incense, and yeah, you know, God bless you, you're Orthodox. Boom. So the Russian church has adopted the Greek church in exchange for buying some incense, right? And icons, right? So the church was located in Kiev. And that stuck in the craw of the Pope, right? And the eastern section, or rather western section of Ukraine, was Habsburg, you know, dyed-in-the-wool, you know, staunch Catholic side, and that Kiev was under the control of the Tsar. And of course, they wanted to overthrow the Tsar. They wanted to get rid of the Orthodox Church. They had claims on the Holy Land. Realize that the Orthodox Church under Constantine, they controlled the Holy Land. And Rome essentially was at war with Constantine. And then they used Muslims, and they will use Muhammad to fight the Christians and the Jews. Rome is not Christian. Rome is pagan. It built the present papal state over in a swamp, over the Temple of Mithra. It is a Mithran cult, which is Egyptian in form, which goes back to Babylon. And it's not Christian. Never was. And even Constantine wasn't a Christian per se. He essentially said, well, I got to bring us all together. And he wore sackcloth, and he chose the Christians and the Jews were not allowed to own property. They were vagabonds. They were cast out. They were outcasts in the realm. And Constantine and the Council of Nicaea essentially said, okay, we're going to use this Bible. He put the Bible down where his throne was. He wore sackcloth. He said, don't come to me. I'm not in charge. It's the Bible. The Bible's in charge, right? But he essentially gave Christians and Jews the right to own property for the first time since they were banished by Adrian and Titus from Jerusalem. So that Rome has always wanted to control, again, the geographic land bridge between the most stable continent of all the continents, which is Africa, where all the minerals are. Huge wealth. You can reach down on the ground and pick up nuggets of cobalt and you name it. Pure ore right out of the ground. Just,
let me stop you right there and ask you about this. Michael Tellinger's been on my show before. He's in Africa. He's trying to do a Ubuntu party in South Africa, but he's discovered cities that are 150,000 years old that sprung up around the gold mines in Africa, and that brings up the prospect that possibly we've had a world civilization, pre-flood world civilization, that had technology beyond what we've got today. And I've also been looking into the whole UFO controversy, and I believe I came to the conclusion that the reason UFOs are so top secret is that the elitists, whoever rule us, don't want us to know that we could have lunch on the moon and be back in time for supper without using a drop of gasoline.
Well, I don't like to speculate, but certainly I believe that we have our own flying saucers made out of Corning porcelain. We've had that since the 40s, using the technology that Tesla had been working on, and that the Germans have been working on.
Yes.
They sent over the Avars sent over that Cretan idiot Einstein, who Tesla called a fool. They sent over Einstein to mess up our physics program. The German Secret Service sent over Einstein to fuck us up, and he did. The point is that Corning glass made the first flying saucer out of porcelain, and that was what was being flown out in New Mexico and Nevada.
They made it out of what? What did you say? They made it out of what?
Porcelain.
Okay.
Porcelain.
Yeah, I've said that's. I believe that in one of my fiction stories. I said they made these round spaceships and out of clay and fired it around the sun and turned it into porcelain.
Porcelain. Well, Corning glass made it. They didn't have to set it up in the sun. But that you realize the Japanese perfected 1,000 years ago a way of doing ceramics, which is unequal, just like their samurai swords. Their katana, their metallurgy and their ceramics the use of glass is phenomenal. And that we are not as good as the Japanese when it comes to the making of steel and porcelain. So I have it on good authority that we have from my own cousin, who was a senior master in Germany for 20 years, and that he knows for a fact that we were using spacecraft in Germany in the 80s and the 90s. And that I have it on other good authority. I was in the Air Force that we did have experimental equipment up at McConnell Air Force, up in McConnell. But that we have been using this experimental stuff for years. And that Tesla had, when you can't use metal, when you've got one of these Tesla generators, you can't use metal, so they use glass. In other words, it would create like a Faraday cage over the generator, so you've got to have non-metallic a container in which to put the Tesla motor. So I can't speculate on whether the Chinese lived on the moon or not. I've certainly heard about that. There's myths. I can tell you that the Smithsonian Institute, its very existence, has been to hide the fact that what George Washington knew and what Meriwether Lewis knew is that there were huge, very sophisticated civilizations in the northwest of the United States that predated the pre-Columbian existence. Atlantis was real. We have prior civilizations that were, again, built, as you stated, is true, around the most stable continent, being Africa, where you could reach down to the ground and get up raw material, where everything isn't folded and crashed under the plate tectonics and buried through mountain building like in the Himalayas. And all that's brand new. The Himalayas are brand new, it's like the mountains. But so, Africa is a stable continent, and that's why the Holy Land is so important. It's without electric, without seafaring, everybody goes over land, whoever controls it controls commerce. Period. And that's basic geography. I'm a geographer by training. And I do know that there were prior civilizations, the mound builders that was covered up in Ohio. The Smithsonian, they discovered in the Northwest a remnant of hieroglyphics and everything else, this huge depository, an underground city, and that with the writing and everything. And the Smithsonian went in and blew it all up, bulldozers. I would take the Smithsonian operators out with a summary court-martial and execute them publicly. What they've done to destroy the history of North America.
Now let me ask you what we've just got a few minutes left here, and I for our audience out there, I ask you to get copies of the Free American. I've got lots of great information there. You can pass it on. You can get copies of the Free American at freeamerican.com or shop.freeamerican.com. And I do need donations. I do need help to continue this radio show and continue what I'm doing. Some of the magazines that I've had were actually sold for about $500,000, and I still retain 50% of it. And that got killed because, well, the intelligence agencies out there, or whoever they are, tried to tell people how radical, how racist, how anti-Semitic, how anti-government I am. And I'm certainly not anti-government. The government, the Constitution promised me, and a Republican form of government. And you can make a donation at freeamerican.com, folks. And Chris, one more. Now, I've got a fiction book that I'm working on. Actually, it began as a fiction story about Atlantis almost 40 years ago, a little over 40 years ago. But my main character was Lucifer. And I find it pretty interesting. I think I've got quotes by Albert Pike about Lucifer being the god of this earth. And I've also kind of questioned, as I've been so demonized by the powers that be, maybe Lucifer wasn't quite the satanic figure that he's portrayed as. So maybe he was demonized a little bit more, and I just wondered what your take is. Lucifer a real being? Was he one of the gods of the past, of this race of Atlanteans that had the technology to build pyramids we can't build today? What?
Well, look, Lucifer is a term that comes directly from the Catholic Church. The light bearer in the Catholic Mass,
yes,
is the the boy that carries the light. He's Lucifer. So the point is the light bringer. And so we're talking about the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were in fact existent. They were the giants, and that they were crossbred in DNA with the Lilliputians, and that we are a result of that. We are a breed. We are bred for our qualities to do work and everything else, and certainly they what they couldn't contend with is the fact that God and the universe acts in ways that they couldn't fully predict, and you had the Earth, the core tumbling, and periodically everybody being wiped out. But certainly the Anunnaki are the ones you're talking about.
All right.
And,
listen, I really appreciate that. We're out of time. Thank you. Thank you for being with me.
At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a wide selection of archived programs. TruthRadio.com. The truth is out there.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you being with me. Bye-bye.
Welcome to another story. This is Barton Hughes. And the subject this time, the power of Satan. When I was in junior high school a long time ago, I was chosen by Miss Brown, the music teacher and band leader, to play the sousaphone. There was one other boy also chosen, but I was asked by her to occupy the first chair. The other boy, being the class bully, did not take kindly to it. Not long afterward, he caught me alone.
Yes, Chris.
So how was that?
It was wonderful. It was absolutely fantastic.
The sound quality was better this time, right?
Yes, sir. I think the sound quality was just fine.
Okay. Well, you and I have common interest here. I was